Okay, first question. Where and when were you born?
I was born in New York City, St. Vincent Hospital, March 6, 1945.
Do you remember any stories your parents told you about the day you were born?
Yes.
Can you provide some?
Well, my mother didn't name me on the first day because she wasn't sure of the name my father wanted. So by the second day, they were pressuring her to name me. My father was at work, and somehow it never really came up, I suppose. So my mother named me Maria Angela. And then and that is the name that is on my birth certificate. But then when my father got to the hospital after work, and she told him what she had named me, his response was, "Are you crazy?" Her name had to be Angela Maria. And my mother's response was, "Well, okay, we'll tell the nurse." And the nurse said, "Well, it's already been entered into the birth certificate. There's nothing we can do about it." And so then my mother said, "Well, we'll just call her Angela." So for all my life, I was called Angela, when legally my name was actually Maria, until 9/11, when I no longer could renew my driver's license because the name on my driver's license said Angela as my first name, when in actuality Maria was my legal first name. And I had to go through a lot of paperwork to straighten it out.
Huh. So your mom just decided to do the name without your dad?
Well, she got confused. She had a very rough labor,
Oh.
and she just got confused.
She knew what you wanted to do the name, but
She knew what she wanted, but she reversed the middle and first names. She didn't do it deliberately. She just got confused.
Hmm.
And then the nurse told her it was too late to change it.
That's funny.
It led to a world of confusion after 9/11. I had to change everything, including my Social Security card. It was very, very confusing.
Wow. Okay, well that answers the next question. Any reasons for why your name is what it is?
My father's mother's name was Angela, and I was to be named after her.
Do you remember your grandparents?
I do not remember my biological maternal grandfather because he died when my mother was 5. But I do remember my grandmother, and my grandmother remarried when my mother was 13, and that man was to become my grandfather. Even though he wasn't my biological grandfather, he was a true grandfather to me in every way.
Oh, what was his name?
Carmine Figliolo.
Oh my gosh, that's such a cool name. Huh, interesting. Okay, so, what about your parents? Anything? Like, when were they born, or?
My mother was born in New York City, and my father was born in Italy, and he came to this country with the crush of immigrants that came. And he was older when he came. My parents were older. He was over 40, I guess, because my mother was 35 when I was born, and my father was 46. So when they married, they were, 34 and 45, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess why did they migrate why did your dad migrate to the U.S.?
Well, I have my own personal theory, but there were no jobs in the town where he lived. My theory is they had a family business that was that grew olives for olive oil, and he was, as the oldest son, was supposed to be the head of it, but I think he didn't want to do that. And they sent him to school, I guess comparable to a college, you might say, to learn how to run the business and keep the books, and he did not want to do that.
Hmm.
That's my theory.
Why? Do you know why?
He just didn't want to do that. He wanted to come to America.
Yeah.
And so that's what he did, leaving the business to his other brothers, and there were very many brothers. I believe there were 9 boys and 1 girl.
Oh my gosh.
And so he came to this country and left the business to the others.
Yeah.
Something like that. It was a really large family.
Any interesting stories about your mom and dad, about the migration, you know?
Oh gosh, I don't really know. They were introduced by my mother's cousin. They just were a typical Italian immigrant couple, even though my mother was born in Manhattan. They just worked really hard until they got enough money to buy their own business and bought a house. They believed owning real estate was security, and so they worked really hard to do and sacrificed a lot in order to do that. And that was very common at that time among immigrants. They felt if they bought property and had their own business, they would be financially secure.
Yeah. Do you remember what years it was? Or?
Yeah, it was after World War II.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They got married in 1944. And I was born in 45. And then I think it was 48 or 49 when they finally saved enough money to buy a store, start a business that had apartments over the house, so they had the income from the apartments, and then they had the grocery, or the cheese shop, really. I guess it was more of a cheese shop.
Cheese.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know how, or is there like any story of how your mom and dad met, or was it just?
They were introduced by my mother's cousin, who ended up being my godmother Katie, and introduced them.
How was that relationship? Were you close to her, or?
Pretty close, yeah. We even when she moved to California, we would write each other a couple times a year.
Oh, that's cute. Any stories passed down about your grandparents? Anything?
Well, the way my biological grandfather died was always passed down. The story went that they thought he had a heart attack. Again, I think he may have had an aneurysm because he was very young. He was in his 30s when he clutched his chest and fell down a flight of steps, head over heels, and he was dead when he was at the bottom of the steps. And he was in his mid-30s, I don't know, like 34, 35, something like that.
Wait, your dad?
My grandfather.
Oh, your
Did you say father? I thought you said grandfather.
no, grandfather. That's what I said. Wow. But didn't your dad also die of a heart attack?
Yes. He was 61 when he died of a heart attack, and I was 16.
Oh.
Yeah.
Were you and your mother, did you have a close relationship?
Yes.
What about your
Very close.
What about your father, even though he died?
Yeah, we did, but he was very, very old school and very, very difficult to communicate with because he never expressed his feelings. So, and he had very set ideas about how things should be.
Yeah.
He was very, very strict with me. He tried to raise me the way I would have been raised had I been born in Italy. But that was very difficult to do in Manhattan.
So what do you mean by that? Like what type of things?
I couldn't go anywhere unless my mother came with me. She was my chaperone.
Oh, yeah.
And I wasn't allowed to go, and I wasn't allowed to go to other people's houses unless he knew them very, very, very well. And there weren't very many people that met his criteria.
Yeah.
He was just very, very old world.
Yeah. Business set mind.
Yeah, he was all business. I don't know. He didn't even smile very often. To him, life was serious stuff.
Trying to succeed.
Just trying
Make-
to survive and
yeah.
succeed and work. To him, life was nothing but work. My mother, on the other hand, worked really hard too. In fact, she had to do a lot of the heavy lifting in our grocery store because my father always did have a heart condition. He couldn't do things like paint or put canned goods on the shelf, and she would have to climb the ladder and do that. Because he just couldn't do it because of his heart. But she was also very lighthearted, and she would sing opera while she would do all this work.
Really?
This annoyed my father no end, that she had a good time while she was working.
Oh my God.
Basically, she was whistling while she worked, like in the Snow White. She just enjoyed living and enjoyed life, and she enjoyed working. I mean, that was just her way, and it really annoyed him.
Aww. What was like the Italy culture? I guess you were saying how
The
your
Italian
dad.
culture.
Yeah, Italian culture.
They always kept the girls very strict. They couldn't go out. I had an uncle, was my father's brother, had one daughter and two sons. The sons pretty much did what he wanted to do. Their daughter was only allowed to go to church by herself. And then when she became older and joined the convent, they were flabbergasted. They didn't understand why. But every day after school, she went to church. Every single day after school. That was the only place she was allowed to go, so that was the only place she went. And then she ended up joining the convent.
Which is
Yeah.
like nuns or whatever.
Yeah, and they were flabbergasted. For some reason, they didn't expect that.
Back to the close relationships. Did you have a good relationship with your grandparents?
Oh yeah,
Or,
used to go to the beach every weekend with them.
Oh,
We lived
really?
in New York, yeah.
but it was your mom's mom
Yeah, my father's parents both passed away. I never met them. They would have been
Were
in
they in Italy?
anyway,
Yeah.
but they had passed away before before I was born.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh, because the grandpa your dad's dad had a heart attack too.
No, that was my mother's dad that
Oh.
collapsed down the steps.
Oh, that was.
I never knew my father's parents. I didn't know anything about them,
Oh, because
other than my father had a picture up that was up all the time, but that was it. And I'd ask, who is that woman? Because she looked mean. And he said that's my mother. Her name was Angela. You're named after her.
Oh.
But she looked mean.
Really?
She looked mean. But I think maybe she must have had a really hard life.
Yeah. So you mostly were close with your mom's parents.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they lived with us.
Oh, did they help with
parents? Yeah, back then there would be different generations would live together. Yeah, they lived with us. My grandfather helped out in the store, and my grandmother kind of ran the house. Did housewife type things, ran the house, cooked, cleaned.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather would help my parents with the store.
Yeah. Did you experience any like ethnic discrimination when you first, or when your parents first came, or your dad first came?
No, because basically they always lived in an Italian neighborhood. When they first, my mother lived, and I guess my dad must have lived too, downtown Little Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And then they bought the business uptown, which was in an area that was supposed to become Little Italy, but it never did quite make it. And it ended up becoming Spanish Harlem, and now it's a very high-end district, but at the time it was an underprivileged area that was trying to become a second Little Italy, but never did quite make the mark.
Um,